What's good people? Immersive here once more with video 2 of this 3-part series about taking your first ever flight. I've been flying regularly for the past 15 years at this point, from 40-minute short hops to cross-country red-eye flights, all the way up to 14 to 15-hour long-haul international flights. So the commercial flying process is fairly simple for me to comprehend. However, some people have never gone on a plane before for one reason or another. So this series is specifically for those viewers and for those frequent flyers that want to make sure that I've covered all the aspects that a beginner flyer needs to be aware of. I'm counting on y'all. The first video covered everything from ticket purchase to the day before the flight, and the video after this is going to go over everything after boarding. So I'll title this one The Airport Experience. Timestamps will be linked below in the description for you to jump around as you please. Let's begin. Okay, we made it. Today is your flight departure date. Are you ready? Of course you are. Let's get started with what you need to bring with you to the airport. Now, if you bring nothing else, there are a few things you need to make sure you bring with you. I call these the big 6. You need your personal identification, a device with cellular or internet connection. This is likely going to be your phone, but it could be a laptop or a tablet, a charger or power source for that device, your boarding pass, some money, card is fine, but a little cash goes a long way, and then any emergency medication if needed. You want to make sure you keep these on your person or at least in your personal item luggage. This way you can prove who you are, you can still communicate with the outside world, you can stay healthy if you need those emergency meds, and you can buy necessities like food if, for whatever reason, your travel plans get severely disrupted. Quick story time. Back in 2016, I went to Thailand with a group of buddies for about 10 days. I managed to hack this trip from Fort Lauderdale to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, to Bangkok and back to Fort Lauderdale for under $600 round trip, and packed everything I needed in a carry-on duffel bag. Another story for another time. I wanted to be a travel content creator back then too. So I had my iPhone and I was excited to try and capture some water adventures our group was having on the trip. I purchased a waterproof phone case before I left home to use on this trip. I tested it before I left home and in the sink and the shower, and no problems. Of course, when I use it in Thailand, within 30 seconds of putting the case in the water, there's a leak and the salt water gets into my phone. And that's it. RIP iPhone 6 Plus. Everyone else is having a great time, jumping in the water and partying, but I've got the sad face now. Not only do I have a several $100 paperweight, but I have no communication to anyone in another country across the world. Extremely frustrating. I'm down, but I'm not defeated. Panicking is something that you never want to do when you're in a situation like this, because you can end up making worse decisions. So I start going through my options. My first recourse is to see if I can get the phone repaired at a local electronics store. No luck. Then I went for the tried and true home remedy, sticking the phone in a large bag of rice. No luck. My last shot was my Nintendo 3DS. It was a 14+ hour flight from Florida to Southeast Asia, and that's enough time to put a serious dent in a Pokemon game. Now I knew that the 3DS had internet connectivity, so I could still communicate with the outside world. Once I got back to the hotel Wi-Fi, I let my family know the situation with my phone. I was able to check on my return flight status and take care of some very rudimentary internet-related tasks. Cashless transactions hadn't taken off like they have post-COVID, but I had access to cash to buy food. I say all that to say that you never know how your travels will turn out, so be prepared for the unexpected. It could be a delay from weather, it could be getting your bags lost, or it could be a lot of things. So having your ID, access to funds, a device that can connect to the internet, whether that's your phone, your laptop, video game system, whatever, your boarding pass and necessary medication can float you some time until you can get back home, or at least back on your feet. All right, so we went over the big 6, and your personal identification is a part of that. Going into effect in the US on May 7th, 2025, the US Department of Homeland Security is requiring all domestic travelers to have ID that is Real ID compliant. How to know if your ID is Real ID compliant? The DHS website has an interactive flowchart that you can use, but to keep things simple, if you have a valid and unexpired state-issued driver's license and it has a star or a flag in the corner, or you see the word enhanced, then you're likely good to go. No driver's license? No problem. If you have a valid and unexpired passport, then you're also likely good to go. There are a few other forms of permissible real ID types, and you can check them out on the DMV website for your state. I've linked the Department of Homeland Security's website in the description, and you can select your state for more info from your specific DMV. Don't forget your luggage, of course. I spoke in depth about luggage in the last video, specifically about the difference between a personal item, a carry-on bag, and a checked bag. If you need more clarity on those three, make sure to check out the first video in this series. A neck pillow or a cushion of some sort comes in handy too for longer flights, as well as a travel water bottle. And just a pro tip, no matter the season, planes all eventually get cold, so you may want to bring a sweater or a light jacket. Now, if you're like me, there always seems to be something that I forget to bring on a trip, and then I have to purchase it later on, costing me money that I did not plan on spending. So a little while ago, I put together a travel essentials checklist to help me make sure that I'm bringing everything with me. I want to share this checklist with you too, so you can download it for free using the link in the video description. TSA, the Transportation Security Administration, has an extensive list of items and substances that explicitly cannot go through security, can only go through in a checked bag, or can go through in both a checked bag and a carry-on, but only after following specific instructions. Make sure to check out the TSA's website for a long and sometimes surprising list of what can and cannot go through security at US airports. Usually the airlines also go along with what the TSA stipulates as what's safe on board, but make sure to verify with the airline that you're traveling on to make sure that those items can make the trip with you. All right, you're all packed up and ready to head to the airport. How early should you get there? If this is your first ever flight, my recommendation is to get to the airport at least 2.5 hours prior to departure. That means you can have up to an hour of delays, a late arriving Uber, inclement weather, traffic delays, and you would still get to the airport with 90 minutes before you take off. Once you get some more flights under your belt, you can adjust when you arrive at the airport depending on your comfort level. But it's always better to get to the airport with time to spare versus rushing and panicking and dashing to your gate. Speaking from experience here. Not all airports are created equally. Depending on the airport you're departing from, an hour and a half before your departure may actually not be a whole lot of time. Tallahassee is going to have a completely different level of busy than Miami, which is a different level of busy than, say, Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, the world's busiest airport by passenger volume. If you're driving to the airport, there are typically two main options for parking. There's your off-site parking and then terminal parking. Off-site parking is usually cheaper, so you save a few bucks, and it's probably not as hectic in the area of the lot. However, you are off-site, so there's a shuttle you have to wait for, not just to go to the airport, but also for when you return. So there's a time cost there. You may want to arrive 30 minutes earlier than you plan to account for any delays at the lot. Also, the shuttle drop-off / pickup location may not be right next to where your terminal is or the door you leave from. You may be in for a bit of a walk with all of your luggage. Alternatively, there's terminal parking where you can park at a lot or garage adjacent to the airport. This makes for less of a haul for departure and arrival once you land. You're in your car much sooner and on your way. There is a cost for convenience, however. It's typically pricier to park close to the terminal, and because this is coveted parking, you may have to circle the lot for quite some time before finding an open spot. There's also the option to catch an Uber or Lyft to the airport and get dropped off right at your terminal. That's always nice. Airports now tend to limit pickup locations, so you might have to walk a bit to get to the designated area depending on the airport. You can also just have family or a friend drop you off or pick you up. Like I just said, each airport is different, and it's pretty cool to see how each of them operate and their nuances. They can, however, also be quite daunting to navigate, especially the larger ones. There's no shame in slowing down to get your bearings to figure out where exactly you're going. Most airports are going to have an information desk where you can ask personnel to point you in the right direction. However, with a few context clues, I'm confident you can figure it out for yourself. Signage within the airport should be visible to direct you. The key word here is should. Check the signs for words like ticketing or check-in or even your specific airline. In case you forgot it, no worries. The airline would be found on your boarding pass. pass. Now it's time for your check bag drop off. If you already have a boarding pass and just a carry-on, you can skip this part and head directly to the security checkpoint. Once you've navigated to your airline's check-in area, you might see some kiosks with screens along with check-in counters with airline personnel. Remember, it's dependent on the airline, but you can typically reprint a boarding pass here, pay for additional bags if needed, or get a tag for your check bag. If all of this seems a bit intense, you can get all of this done at a check-in counter with a real human. Just tell them where you're going and that you need to check your bag. They will likely review your boarding pass, check your ID, weigh your bag here. You did make sure it's not overweight, right? And then send it away to be screened before it's loaded onto your flight. You want to make sure you have everything that you need out of that bag because you're not going to see your check bag again until after you land at your final destination. Now that you've checked in your bag, you can head to security checkpoint. Make sure you have your ID and your boarding pass nearby and available. Before we go to security though, here's an example of a mobile boarding pass so you can see the information on it. The layout may differ depending on the airline, but the details are largely the same. You see the departing airport, your arriving airport, the boarding terminal and gate and flight number here, boarding group, your seat assignment on the plane, the most updated status of your flight, the departure time, and the passenger's name. Sometimes you'll see the boarding time, which is usually 40 minutes prior to the departure time, and the time that the boarding door closes, which is 10 to 15 minutes before departure. That's a very important time to be cognizant of because the airline will not reopen the boarding door once closed. There are sometimes other markings and icons on here, but that's for a more advanced flyer. If you have a connecting flight, make sure you have all of your boarding passes for your full itinerary. For instance, if you're flying from Miami to Palm Springs, California, you'll need your boarding pass for Miami to LAX and then a separate one for LAX to PSP. All right, in a post 9/11 world, security at US airports is taken incredibly seriously. Some may say too seriously, but personally, I'm appreciative of the work that TSA does. Yeah, everyone isn't in the best, cheeriest, liveliest mood, but it's tireless work that keeps the skies pretty safe. Just know that TSA is the gateway that you have to pass through to get to your destination. So, interact with the agents with a positive and non-combative attitude. Believe me, it goes a long way. This can be the longest part of the travel process outside of the actual flight. On non-peak days at a busy airport, you could be waiting 10 to 15 minutes, whereas on particularly busy days like a summer Friday or Sundays or holidays, 45 minutes to an hour or more is possible. Patience is key. Again, each airport's going to differ how their security is set up, but usually you're going to go through a checkpoint closest to your boarding gate. There will be someone at the start of the checkpoint line that looks at your boarding pass to direct you in the correct line, standard security or TSA pre-check. Once you get to the front of the line, there will be a TSA agent that will ask for your ID and then possibly ask to scan your boarding pass. A lot of airports have moved to biometric scanning to identify passengers with a quick picture. Also, there may be police officers present with trained dogs sniffing for drugs and other illegal substances. Although they may be cute and cuddly looking, resist the urge to pet them. Proceed normally with your luggage to the front of the line, unless of course the officer directs otherwise. Once you get the okay to proceed from the agent, you get to the secondary screening area. A lot goes on here, but here are the basics. There are usually large bins that go onto a conveyor belt that goes into a screening device. And when I say bin here, I mean a container, not like the trash can, like they would say in the UK or Australia. Shout out to my Bluey fans though. No large volumes of liquids, gels, or aerosols are permitted through security. This includes water and shampoos and some creams of 3.4 ounces or more. If you didn't put these in your larger checked bags, you might be forced to discard it here. You'll have to put luggage, all luggage, into these bins or on the belt. Laptops and chargers typically have to come out of their bags and may have to sit in a separate bin. Shoes, watches, sunglasses, belts, and any accessories with metal in them usually have to come off and go into a bin. Typically there's a TSA agent nearby that will be directing traffic and you can ask them where your stuff needs to go. Keep in mind that many of them do this day in and day out for hours at a time. They know the protocol like the back of their hand. After you have everything on the conveyor belt, you'll proceed through a metal detector or a multi-wave imaging machine. You can also, if you prefer, ask for a manual pat down. Realize that you may be randomly selected for extra screening. It happens, just be calm, and that's why you got to the airport early, right? It's best to dress comfortably because you have to take a lot of this stuff off and then basically reassemble your whole life on the other side once you're through security. It is a minor hassle, but it becomes easier the more you do it. And just a mini rant here. It seems like a growing number of people feel violated with the security process. And sure, there are bad actors, the same as anything, right? But the majority of these agents are here to help, not to desecrate your property. And once you're finished interacting with them, you don't have to deal with them anymore that day or until the next time you fly. So it's not that serious. Okay, now that we've made it through security, if you're liking what you hear so far, make sure to hit that like button. It lets the YouTube algorithm know that what I'm yammering on about is valuable in some way, shape, or form. Also, consider subscribing to the channel. I appreciate it. Okay, you booked your flight, you packed for your trip, you got to the airport, dropped off your check bag, you made it through dreaded security. The hard part is over. Let's head over to our gate. On the other side of the security checkpoint is what's referred to as the sterile side of the airport. Throughout the terminal, there are wall-mounted screens that will you can monitor the departures for that day. Double check for your flight on the screens by identifying either the flight number that matches the one on your boarding pass or the flight routing. If you're going just off of the routing, make sure the airline and departure times match, since there may be many flights that day for a particular routing, like JFK to MIA. The two main things you're looking for here are your gate information and the flight status. Both of them are subject to change. The gate information changing is inconvenient, but not a huge deal. The flight status changing can indeed be a huge deal, especially for a first-time flyer. We'll talk about that in a bit. Hopefully you've cleared security with some time to spare before boarding. If so, you've got some time to explore the airport. First things first are to identify your gate and where exactly it is. You don't have to be near it per se, but just have the awareness of where it is, how to get to it, and how long it will take to get to it. Some of these airports have elongated terminals, and getting from A1 to A30 can be a 15 to 20 minute walk or longer. Next, be aware of your boarding time so you're not running across the airport to try and make your flight. No one likes to be rushed. Build the time in and make this a pleasant experience. You want to have the time to use the restroom and find an available power outlet or charging station to get your devices all juiced up. You won't have cell service when you're airborne, and not all planes are equipped with Wi-Fi, so you might want to download a Spotify playlist or a podcast to your device, or a movie or something. Maybe you want to grab something to eat before the flight. Once again, every airport is different, but I think that many airports are elevating the quality of their food options. Most airports have your casual and standard fast food options, but some airports have really good food, like steakhouses and lively sports bars and great sushi restaurants and other impressive dining spots. A super underrated way to pass the time at some airports is to visit their art exhibits. Within the passageways of the terminals, sometimes you'd think that you're in a museum with the complexity of the installations. If you've got the time and you've got discerning taste, I recommend the art displays. Being able to explore an airport can find some really solid gems. Okay, so before we board, let's back up a bit. What should you do if your flight is delayed or canceled? Let's get to some terminology first. A delay is just that. The initial departure has been pushed back for a period of time. I categorize a minor delay being anything 1 hour or less, moderate delays being 1 to 3 hours, and then major delays being 3 hours or more. However, the key thing to keep in mind is that a delayed flight is still planned to depart. A cancellation, on the other hand, means that for one reason or another, the flight is unable to be performed. Delays may lead to cancellations, but a cancellation is firm. No one is going anywhere. Once you're made aware of moderate or major delays, it's good practice to speak with the gate agent to ask if you're in danger of missing your connecting flight, if you have one. The airlines and their gate agents are pretty good at giving updates over the PA system about the delayed flight, but feel free to check with either them or the rebooking team to see if there are any last minute alternatives. Sometimes there's a cost associated with adjusting your itinerary last minute, but it's often dependent on the airline. Also, you may want to provide an update to your hotel or housing host if you have an Airbnb or Vrbo, for example, and possibly your transportation arrangements to let them know that you will be coming in a bit later than anticipated. As you may have figured out, a flight cancellation is typically a worse scenario. A canceled flight almost always requires a rebooking on another flight with that same airline. That flight could be in a couple of hours or the next day, just the next day that the flight is scheduled. Neither are ideal, and there are several possible scenarios that can unfold depending on the length of the delay. Delays can occur due to a variety of issues, including weather, from the takeoff airport or the arrival airport, flight crew that's missing, perhaps the captain for your flight is coming in from a delayed flight, mechanical issues with the aircraft. It is a machine after all, and just like your car, sometimes machines break, and more reasons. Now, because many times flight updates come through on the app on our phones, you may be advised of a flight delay well before you arrive at the airport. And though it may be tempting not to show up at the airport until later, it's a best practice to still get to the airport at your initially scheduled time. Why? Because sometimes the airlines are able to swap in another aircraft to perform the flight, and the delay is shorter than anticipated. Or there's a flight attendant on call nearby that can fill in for a crew member that has suddenly fallen ill. I've seen both scenarios happen, and we've definitely had more empty seats on the flight due to people thinking we would have a 5-hour delay, missing the flight because it only ended up being a 30-minute delay. On rare occurrences, a flight has already departed but cannot land at the scheduled airport. For example, something that's common in South Florida's rainy season, a plane is flying New York to Miami, but severe thunderstorms have popped up in the area within the hour, leading to a ground stop in MIA. This happens in the summertime, and no planes can take off or land due to the weather. Flights heading to MIA will typically enter what are called holding patterns, which are large loops or figure eights away from the storm to wait for the weather to improve. But South Florida storms can be persistent, and sometimes planes have to hold for longer than their reserve fuel capacity. These planes will then be what's called diverted to another airport with the capacity to receive them. Could be Orlando, Tampa, Fort Myers, Fort Lauderdale, and they land here to wait for the weather at the initial airport to clear. Then, after refueling, they take off to land at the initial airport. It's a lengthy and unexpected delay, but hey, safety first. Keep in mind that in most cases, U.S. airlines are not contractually obligated to provide hotel and or meal accommodations if there are flight delays or cancellations. Sometimes if the delay was the airline's fault, they may provide some sort of compensation as a show of good faith. This could be a future flight voucher, a meal voucher, or a nearby hotel room for the night if there are no upcoming flight alternatives. Like I mentioned, delays and cancellations are not ideal, and they can be quite stressful. The biggest tip I have for travelers, especially first-time flyers that encounter those delays or cancellations, is just to keep patient. Look, you're not the only one affected by this, and guess what? The airline's employees have had their day disrupted too. And this is their job. So now many of them will have to be away from their families for possibly an additional day or more. Their dinner plans may have been scrapped, or now they can't go to their kids' game or recital, oftentimes due to something that is out of everyone's control. So please have a bit of patience and sympathy for these humans that are trying to accommodate hundreds of weary passengers operating and tending to a large metal tube flying 30,000 feet in the sky. Just keep a cool head, all right? Okay, it's almost time to board your flight. You've navigated to your gate. Now check and confirm that your gate matches what's shown on your boarding pass. There's often a screen there at the gate with information for the next departing flight. Make sure that it's your scheduled flight. Sometimes there are last-minute gate changes. It happens. If you do have any questions, make sure you check with the gate agent. Ask the gate agent. Don't be afraid to ask questions. That's why they are here, to help. While you're waiting, pay attention to the announcements that come up over the public address system. There's often useful information about your flight that you need to be aware of. In some instances, you may hear your name. Sometimes it's just a name discrepancy. Sometimes it's a first-class seat upgrade. You never know, so make sure to pay attention. As displayed on your boarding pass, there's a group or zone designated for each passenger. The gate agent will call up each group when it's time for that group to board. They usually call Group A or 1 first to allow first class or super high reward members on first. If that's you, then welcome aboard. Then they follow up with special groups. This can be active or reserve military and their families, families with small children, those with physical limitations, those in wheelchairs. It really depends on the airline, but those are typically the major groups. Then they call each subsequent group in alphabetical or numerical order, Group B, Group C, etc. People do tend to crowd around the gate area, and it creates a bottleneck, but remember to exercise patience. Every ticketed passenger eventually gets on the plane. Now, the common reason why there's this bottleneck is due to the somewhat limited space of the overhead luggage compartment. Understandably, people prefer to store their carry-on bags in the space right above them or somewhere close. If you're in the latter boarding groups, usually you have to take what's left over. That could be close to your assigned seat or somewhere completely different in the airplane. Now, if that space runs out, there's something that a lot of flyers would have to do and they abhor it. It's called gate checking. And almost universally, it seems, airlines have implemented gate checking for those last couple of boarding groups. If your bag gets gate checked, that means that you'll be assigned a bag tag to put on your carry-on and are to drop it off at the bottom of the jetway. That's the walkway that leads from the gate to the actual aircraft. Some call it a jet bridge. Here, you will board the plane like normal, but all gate checked bags will be put underneath the aircraft, and you'll usually see it again only at baggage claim at your final destination, like a checked bag. Having your bag gate checked honestly kind of sucks, but it happens. Make sure to take all of your essentials with you, and hey, you'll collect your bag when you land. Once your zone is called, you'll scan your boarding pass and board the plane. It might take a while to get everybody seated, so you may have to wait a second while everybody gets situated, then it'll be your turn. Navigate to the row and seat on your card, on your boarding pass, and don't be shy. You may have to tap someone on the shoulder to let them know that you need to enter that row to be seated. Make sure to use your manners and say excuse me as you squeeze into the row. Find some space to put your carry-on. Remember, it may not be immediately next to your seat, and your personal item. That should be able to slide up under the seat in front of you and slide into your seat. If you're looking for a carry-on that can turn into a personal item, make sure to check out the Personal Item Suitcase 3.0 from Takeoff Luggage. The link, I have it in the description. Try to get as situated as possible on the plane, but don't panic. There are flight attendants throughout the aircraft that are able to assist you. There will be a lot going on. You may have your hands full, and the space to maneuver isn't the largest, but take a deep breath, use the seat back pocket to hold some loose items, compose yourself, buckle your seatbelt, and pat yourself on the back. You're on the plane. From here, you can sit back and relax. Really, once the rest of the plane fills up, the flight crew will be closing the boarding door. It's at this point that I put my phone on airplane mode. People have differing views on this, but I'm in the camp of using airplane mode when I fly. I can still use Wi-Fi and Bluetooth for all the connectivity that I need. And next is getting ready for takeoff. So that brings us to the end of video 2. The flight experience is covered in video 3, so make sure to check out that one. I'll also speak about what to expect during the flight, upon descent, and some of my insights to hopefully make this a positively memorable experience. If you landed on this video first, I appreciate that, but I also have part 1 that goes over everything that happens before you get to the airport. So check out that one too. Make sure to like this video if you got something useful out of it, and subscribe if you appreciate content like this. I truly appreciate it. Peace and love, and bye for now.